Hi, good evening, everybody. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming out. My name is Jeremy Davies. I'm the superintendent of schools for Kenilworth, and I'm glad that you're here. Thank you so much. And for anyone who's watching at home, good to see you as well. No idea, but I'm going to be talking in this general direction just because there might be people watching at home. But I'm glad you came in person because it's much easier to ask questions in person. But thanks for joining us. Real quick show of hands. 5th grade parents, guardians? 5th grade. 6th grade parents, guardians? 7th grade? Okay. Anyone else? Okay, good. Good to see the variety here. Thanks for coming out. We want to make sure as your children prepare for our upcoming 6th through 8th grade middle school experience that we're communicating effectively to you, that we've heard your questions, your concerns, your ideas, and that we can be in good communication about all those things. We want to make sure the transition is a successful one. We want to make sure that you feel comfortable with everything that's happening in our district, make sure that your children feel comfortable with everything that's happening in our district. So that's the purpose of tonight. I have a team of some of my colleagues here with me, so I just want to introduce real quick. Mr. Vincent Ganella is our school business administrator. So he's here. John Perillo is our David Brearley Middle High School principal. Ms. Pavlicek, Madeline Pavlicek, is our assistant principal. Also joining us tonight is Mr. Bubnowski, the Harding principal, Ms. Carrera, the Harding assistant principal, and then Mr. Connolly couldn't be here tonight. He is our supervisor of buildings and grounds, but he's obviously in charge of much of the construction. And also joining us tonight is our middle school counselor, Mrs. Megan Harrison. So we'll be here after the presentation for Q&A. I might not be able to answer all the questions. They might be able to help me out. There might be questions that you have that we don't know the answer to yet, but you're giving us ideas to process and think about moving forward. So that's the purpose, is to really have a conversation about this upcoming transition. But first, before we have a conversation, I just wanted to go through some of the nuts and bolts of what's happening in our district. In terms of our construction timeline, you've seen a lot of work going on in the district. There's a number of different projects. The back entrance to Brearley is almost done, so it should be done any day now, and that's the main entrance where students come into the building. It's the main entrance where staff comes into the building, and that's one of the reasons why this is part of our referendum project, because we want our students to come into a building and know that they're coming into a place that just feels strong and supportive, and that entrance is going to be that kind of an entrance to our school building. The Harding Auditorium, we're hopeful that it's going to be completed in December in time for winter concerts and performances. Same thing with the Brearley Auditorium. We're hoping those December deadlines are met. We're getting closer to December, so we'll have backup plans in case concerts and such need to be in gyms and whatnot this year. But we're hopeful that all that stuff will be taking place in December in the auditoriums. It's exciting to see. There's going to be a whole new sound systems, lighting systems, seats. It's going to be really great for our students and for you as well. And then the big one is the Brearley Wing, which you see, that's the construction site over here. You see the big steel beams are now up, and you'll see those walls rising pretty soon. We anticipate that the Brearley Wing will be completed as of June, and then we have the big shift process of moving furniture from Harding to Brearley, moving furniture from the old part of Brearley to the new part of Brearley, and all sorts of things like that happening over the summer. So we anticipate that the new wing will be open as of September, and that it'll be housing the middle school, 6th grade through 8th grade. Just to remind you, in case you are unaware, the bottom floor of the new wing is the state-of-the-art science labs for high school, and the top floor is the middle school. The entire second floor of David Brearley is becoming the middle school. Right now, high school students go up, middle school students come down. There's a lot of crossover, and we're working to make sure that that crossover no longer is happening. Couple things, and then we'll get to some questions. We anticipate that you have questions about the transitions. 6th graders coming into 7th grade, 5th graders coming into 6th grade. So we have transition days in June. These are things that we've always done for rising 7th graders, but this coming year we're doing them for our rising 6th and 7th graders. So both grades will have these transition experiences where students come to David Brearley, they receive a tour of the building, a scavenger hunt, a presentation. We go over all sorts of things with them so that they feel like they've been in the building and they know it a little bit. Harding has traditionally done moving up ceremony for 6th grade. This year that will also be done for 5th grade. So we want to make sure that those 5th graders who are making that transition from one building to another have that experience of their moving up ceremony. So there'll be 2 moving up ceremonies in June, and you'll hear more details about that from Mr. Bobnowski and Ms. Carrera. Over the summer, there's a summer readiness program for certain students, and you'll get more information about that if your student needs or wants to become more ready for the transition. We also have summer reading for all grades in the middle school. So 6th graders will read, rising 6th graders will read a text for going into 6th grade, same with 7th graders, same with 8th graders. And then, of course, we have our traditional orientation programs. They're usually in August. The week or so before school begins is when our orientation programs run. We'll be communicating out those dates to you after the new year. So you'll get those dates in January, but know that there is an orientation program. It's always been for 7th graders, but it will be this year, there'll be separate orientation programs, one for 6th, one for 7th graders. So that, again, students have that opportunity to be in the building before the school year starts so that they can get to know their lockers, get to know where the classes are, where they're going, find the routes, know where the bathroom is, the nurse's office, the counselor's office. We want to make sure they feel comfortable, and so that's what happens on those transition days, both in June and in August. And then there's also a parent orientation in August. Typically, it's on the same night as the student orientation. So the students come in the morning. We have the students here for their orientation program. And then we have the parents back in the evening where we go over all the nuts and bolts, student handbook type stuff, and answer all sorts of questions so that students feel comfortable with their child rising into the middle school. So that's what we do with some of our transitions. Want to talk a little bit about our middle school culture that we create and that we're working to even enhance even more as we build this 6th through 8th grade middle school. The middle school will have its own principal moving forward. So right now, Mr. Perillo and Ms. Pavlicek as principal and assistant principal, they oversee grades 7 through 12. We believe, and we've planned for this, that in order for the middle school to truly have a middle school identity, it needs to have its own principal. That person can really focus on your children as middle schoolers. Middle school is such an important time in youngsters' lives. There's so many things happening in their world, and you need someone who understands them, and we want to make sure that you have a building leader that truly gets the middle school vibe and knows how to be the best principal for your children. So we'll have a principal. The middle school currently has a dedicated counselor, that is Mrs. Harrison. So this will continue where the middle school has its own counselor directly focused on 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Also, the middle school will have its own nurse. Again, we want to make sure that you feel that your children are safe and well cared for when they're with us. So they have their own dedicated counselor, their own dedicated nurse. The middle school, the new wing, will have a nurse's office specifically for middle school students. The middle school will have its own schedule. It'll be different than the Harding schedule. So what current 6th graders are experiencing will be different than what next year's 6th graders experience, if that makes any sense. So the middle school will have its own schedule, and that'll be the same schedule for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So they'll all be one unit operating along the same middle school schedule. Similarly, academic calendar will be a middle school focused. Like, I don't know if you even realize this, but Harding operates on trimesters, Brearley operates on quarters. So the middle school will be quarter-based. So little things like that will be focused on the middle school. Also know that culturally, we have middle school specific recognitions. Right now we have a David Brearley Middle School Scholars Award. We have a David Brearley Middle School Pride Award. And then we have, of course, the extracurriculars. Most of our extracurriculars for the middle school are middle school specific. There are a few that span both high school and middle school, like the robotics team can be middle schools, but we have a specific robotics club just for middle schoolers. But most of our clubs are middle school specific. And basketball is one of the sports that we have for middle school students, so you'll see that. On the left-hand side there is just some of the events that are uniquely middle school. Again, we want to make sure your children feel like they are in their own space that's focused on the middle school, and those are some of the events that take place throughout the course of the calendar year that really bring the vibe out so that your children feel like they're in a space that's theirs as a 6th, 7th, or 8th grader. Another big concern that we thought folks might have is just that separation, making sure that my 11-year-old or 12-year-old daughter is not kind of mingling with an 18-year-old high school boy, right? Things like that. We anticipate that parents might have concerns. So we've worked really hard with this renovation and with the addition to make sure that there's separation. We want the middle schoolers to be in the middle school section. We want the high schoolers to be in the high school section. We've made a lot of great strides over the last few years to improve that separation. For example, currently, middle schoolers are only allowed to use the restrooms upstairs, and high schoolers are only allowed to use the restrooms downstairs. That's current. That will continue. Middle schoolers will only be allowed to use the restroom in the middle school and high school in the high school. I skipped. School entry. The entrance that I just talked about at the beginning, that's being built, all students will enter that back entrance, but immediately upon entering the doors, middle schoolers will veer to the left, and they'll head to that back gym that's there, and middle schoolers will be housed there until it's time to go to class, whereas high schoolers will continue moving straight forward, and they'll be coming to the cafeteria here, where high schoolers will reside until school begins. So in that way, as soon as they get into the campus, basically, we're separating middle schoolers from high schoolers as soon as they walk into the building. We are also considering different entry possibilities, like do we adjust start times, things like that, for a staggered start so that people are coming in at different times and leaving at different times. So that's in discussion right now. I mentioned the bathrooms. The cafeteria, this is currently the middle school and high school cafeteria that you're sitting in. Moving forward, it will be the high school cafeteria. The middle schoolers, your 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, will be having their cafeteria in that back gym. Part of the referendum project is that the back gym is being equipped with a kitchen. So that kitchen is being built back there in that back gym. There's a whole space carved out for it, and middle schoolers will be there. So they won't be coming into this space and interacting with high schoolers ever. They have their own periods for lunch. They have their own space for lunch. Similarly with the gym, they will not ever be changing in the same moment in a locker room with high schoolers. So middle schoolers have their own PE periods. High schoolers have their own PE periods. They're never crossing paths in a locker room or for a PE period. So we know that those are some concerns that parents might have, and we're making sure that those things remain separated so that developmentally and age-appropriate things are happening where they're supposed to happen. I mentioned the upstairs, the downstairs, hallways. There should not be any crossover. There are a few times where a middle schooler might need to come to a room down here. For example, we have a dance studio. So if your child happens to take dance as either a cycle or an elective or something like that, they would have to come down the staircase. But that staircase is very close to that middle school entrance, and there won't be really any interaction with high schoolers. So we've really worked to minimize the crossover that's happening. That's it for my presentation portion. I want to give you a bunch of nuts and bolts and kind of tell you where we are and what we've been thinking about. And now we want to open this up to you. What are you thinking about? What questions do you have? What concerns do you have? What are things that you want us to think about as we move forward over the next 6 months that you want us to communicate out to you so that you feel comfortable with this transition and that we can make sure your kids feel comfortable with this transition? So I open it up now. I'll answer questions that I can. We're also taking notes. So if we can't answer a question, we will get back to you with information. Yes, sir?
So you were talking about a new principal for the middle school, new nurse for the middle school, new counselor for the middle school. What about the teachers for the 6th grade? Are they going to come from Harding?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily, it could be a direct, all the 6th grade team is coming to Brearley, but we haven't worked out those details yet, but we're not increasing our teaching staff with this transition because we're not increasing our students. So there is no need to increase our staffing from that perspective, but...
Do you envision then increasing class size if you're not sure if it's 1-for-1 coming from Harding into Brearley? Because if you're not increasing students, so work with me on the math for that, right? So if you're going to take a 1-for-1, I understand no increased class size.
Yeah.
If you don't take all the teachers from Harding, are we expecting less 6th graders?
No. Sorry. We will be taking 1-for-1 mathematically. I just don't know if it's the 6th grade. Like right now there's a bunch of names that I could rattle off. I don't know if it's going to be them, but it's going to be a 1-for-1 so that class sizes don't increase.
Thanks.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. Yes, sir.
2 things. You said that they're going to be housed in the morning in the small gym,
Yes.
and then they're going to eat in that small gym. Are they also having a gym in that small gym?
So the space is designed for that. And we have protocols that where like these cafeteria tables will quickly be folded up and moved off into the side so that the gym can take place. The way the schedule currently is unfolding, we don't necessarily need to do that, but the space is designed to do that. So the way it's looking right now is that 8th grade, for example, will have 8th grade gym, and no one else, grades 6 through 12, will have gym at the same time. So that's the way it's playing out. But if there were a situation down the road next year or the next year or the next year where because of staffing or because of the schedule, for example, 10th graders and high schoolers need to have gym at the same time as 7th graders, they would be in separate spaces.
And so everybody's going to come through that new entrance next year.
Yeah.
That's a lot more parents dropping off kids. I mean, I know it's crazy now in the morning. So I don't know, adding 100 more student drops off. Did you ever think about, when you have that little loop that they made over the year, did you ever think about maybe having them enter through the new building?
Yeah, 2 things. One, that is one of the reasons why we're considering a staggered start time because of the drop-off, right? Like that bottleneck that currently exists with 6 grades. Now we add a 7th grade coming to one building, eek, right? So that's one of the considerations. The little loop over here, we've spoken with the Kenilworth police about that. They have major concerns because of the backup that will cause on Monroe. It just takes every kid getting out of every car takes a few seconds, and then all of a sudden there's 50 cars lined up, and it becomes a nightmare. So we have considered that. That little driveway that's created there is really for during the day. If a parent needs to come in for a meeting with a teacher or the principal or the nurse to pick up a child from the nurse's office, that's where you'll go and park your car to run into the building, to drop off lunch, to pick up your kid, to have a meeting. So that's really designed for that kind of interaction. It's not equipped to really handle 300 kids being dropped off. Good question. Yes?
How do you think you're going to be able to stop the younger kids from going down and the older kids from going up?
Sorry, I don't know if I should be repeating the questions for folks at home, but the question is how are we stopping students from going down and going up?
Because you have the high schoolers downstairs, the younger ones upstairs. How are you stopping them from going down? Because you say they're only on the top floor, the 5th, 6th, and 7th, right?
Yeah.
So how are you stopping them from going down to high school?
Yeah, a couple things. One, we always have staff members on hall duty. And we have them at key spots, and that hall duty person is supposed to keep kids from going into certain zones. Number 2, there's consequences, and we have grade level assemblies with all of our students. And they know that there's consequences if they find themselves in a space where they're not supposed to be. Currently, if a middle schooler ends up in a high school bathroom, that's a problem, and there's a consequence for that. Same thing, if a high schooler ends up in a middle school bathroom, there's a consequence for that. And in order to get into a bathroom, you have to sign in with your student ID number or last name, and your picture pops up on the screen, so the teacher who's sitting there at the door, at the bathroom, knows who you are and knows what grade you're in, so that's how we prevent those things from happening, and there are consequences for that. I also, currently it is hard to manage that because high schoolers are supposed to be upstairs and middle schoolers are supposed to be downstairs sometimes. Whereas in the future, it really shouldn't be the case except for a few minor occasions. But there should be no reason ever that a high schooler is upstairs. Whether a middle schooler is downstairs, maybe, but there should not be high schoolers upstairs ever.
this addition, you're saying the middle schoolers are upstairs and the high schoolers are downstairs. Is it connecting to the existing school on both levels?
Yes. Yeah, so the question is the addition connecting the school, is the new part, the new wing connected to the old part on both levels? Yes, there's hallway accesses on both levels. Yeah. Yes?
I'm not sure if the sixth graders now at Harding get recess, or if they have a recess here.
So the question is about Harding and recess for sixth graders. Currently, Harding has sixth grade recess 1 day a week as part of their cycle. 1 day per week, sixth graders have recess. But that's not part of the plan moving forward with the middle school. It's not typical that middle schoolers have recess. That usually ends in elementary school, and many middle schools are 6th through 8th. So we're kind of in line with middle schools in general.
What time is start and end for fifth graders?
Sixth grade? Next year?
Yes.
It depends. That's a question that we're going to get an answer to you moving forward. As I said, we're considering kind of staggered starts. Right now, the David Brearley school day begins at 7:45 a.m. and ends at 2:23 p.m. So that's the school day, but that might change. So don't quote me on that for what a sixth grader schedule will be, but that might change. Yes, sir.
What's the, I mean, obviously we don't know the start time, you said that. What's the earliest that we can drop the students off?
So the question is, what's the earliest we can drop students off? So currently, the building opens up at 7:15. So 30 minutes prior to classes beginning, we open up the building. Again, we haven't ironed out that specific detail yet for next year, depending on start times, but I imagine it would be something similar.
And is there any way that the gate on 14th Street could be open so kids, we could drop them off on 14th Street and walk straight to that back entrance? I know it's locked a lot.
Is there any way that the gate on 14th Street could be open? I thought it was supposed to be open, so isn't it supposed to be open, Mr. Ganella? I'm looking at you. I think it's supposed to be open.
Track. Yeah, it's like just walk to the track and just right to the back of the building.
I think it is. Yeah, I'm pretty certain it is. I see students walking from there now, so I think it is open. And that the intent is to have it open so that students can use that cut through the field to get to school. Yeah, you're thinking about drop-off, I can see. Yes, Mr. Ganella.
What extracurricular activities, specifically sports, are in there?
For middle school?
For middle school.
Do you want to talk about that? There's a microphone right there.
Sports specifically?
Sports is basketball. Okay, sorry. Yeah, for middle school right now, the district has basketball as an after-school extracurricular program that runs in the winter. So it starts December and runs through February.
I heard you correct. Everybody, 6th, 7th, 8th, and all the high school kids are going in the same entrance.
Same entrance, yes. The question is, are all the students going in the same entrance?
Why?
Well, the front door of David Brearley is right over here. It's nice, but dropping off on Monroe is just not that can't happen. That would be an utter disaster. So then we have a side entrance over here, again, that's right in the driveway. If everyone were stopping right there, no one would get to school on time. They'd be at least 30 minutes late. So then you have to send people into the back, and then the closest door is that main entrance that we've redesigned.
What's back there? Roundabout?
There's a little curve. If you drive out there, I don't know if you walked here or drove here, but if you drive out, you'll just kind of swing by. You'll see it. It's a big, huge entrance. And there's a whole curb of drop-off spots. And you know, people need to pull up. And if everyone pulls up, then it's not an issue. And then if everyone gets out when they pull up, that's fine. But It is a bottleneck. Whenever we have that parent orientation, and I think you know I used to be principal, I would beg parents, if you drop your child, if school starts at 7:45, if you drop your child off at 7:40, it's a disaster. If you drop your child off at 7:35, there's nobody here. It's amazing what 5 minutes will do, and I know how hard it is. I have a child myself. I know how hard it is to get people out the door, but that 5-minute difference really does help. Mr. Ganell.
That drop-off in the front is really designed for two purposes: emergency purposes to allow fire, police, emergency ambulances to come in and deal with something that might be happening in the middle school. But it's also designed for a parent who has to pick up a kid, so they don't have to go all the way around the building. So that disappointment where it is, they could just quickly go to middle school, get it, or give them lunch or whatever that is, they can drop off. That's what it's really not designed for the mass 450 kids that are coming. Correct. Exactly.
So a child walking to school has to go through the parking lot?
Yeah. Question is does a child walking to school have to go through the parking lot? Yes. Yes. Does it seem safe to walk through the parking lot? I mean, they don't walk, I'm sorry. They don't walk through the parking lot. There's sidewalks all along the sides, and then there's a special crosswalk in the back where they're supposed to cross. We also have, I didn't mention this, but David Brearley itself has both a school resource officer and a special law enforcement officer, and we're working on getting a security guard. So we have a lot, and those folks are out in the morning helping students with the drop-off and the navigating the parking lot. But for those who walk to school, I generally see them walking along, like sometimes people walk from the Harding area and they just walk along the sidewalk there to that back entrance. And sometimes I see people coming in that back gate and they walk along the sidewalk on the other side and then cross up by the school where there's a crosswalk.
You mentioned the security guard. We're 4 new staff people for the conversion. Is there anything else that we should be expecting? So I remember when we were talking the referendum, I guess it wasn't very clear to me that we were increasing staff size this much. So security, nurse, principal, counselor.
So the counselor's already here.
Okay.
So she worked here for many years. So we're increasing her role. Sorry. The nurse is already here. The district currently has 3 nurses, and so that 3rd nurse is here for the middle school. The 3rd nurse came about during COVID, and that 3rd nurse works really well for when nurses are absent, nurses need to go on field trips, nurses take their lunch. So having that 3rd nurse already exists. So we're not increasing the nurse, we're not increasing the counselor, and the security is an aide position. So it's not a...
So principal, are we going to have an assistant principal?
No.
I'm just trying to get an understanding of what the tax implication of all this really is.
Fair. Yep, fair.
We've been experiencing a lot of rapid movement.
Fair. Yep.
So it's 2 new people we should be expecting as add staff for the extensions?
One new, like full-fledged position that has like a salary to it. The security aide, I mean, it's a paraprofessional rate. They get paid on an hourly rate.
And that's all we should expect?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Where do the kids get dismissed?
Question is, where do the kids get dismissed? They go back out the same way they came in.
That's a lot of kids. I think it's going to be,
Agreed.
I don't want to say it on camera.
Yeah. Yes. The question is where do they get dismissed, and isn't that going to be a lot of people? And that's why we're considering the staggered. Right now.
Consider it another entrance. Is there another way to have a different entrance for the younger kids versus the older kids?
That is a possibility. So I'm not saying we can't consider that. I just think the more effective way to go is with the staggered start time. So, like right now, David Brearley has 750 students in it. They all get dismissed at the same time. It's a lot of kids at one time, and then it just kind of, over about 5 minutes, it's no longer. With a staggered start, you would have 500 students leaving at one time for the high school, and then you'd have the 300 or so middle school students leaving at a completely different time. So the staggered start equates to a staggered dismissal, so that's in my view, that's the better way to approach that bottleneck that happens, rather than having children exit a door where there's no pickup spots, and now they're just hanging out on Monroe or hanging out on the side of a building in a field. You know, right now, October, it hasn't rained in months, so that's not that big of a deal, but when it's snowing, raining, that is the best spot. It's a new entrance that's been built to house students. Having been the principal here, when it's pouring out, students didn't want to leave and go off into the rain until they knew their parent was visible. That created a kind of a disaster, frankly, in the hallways. Now we have this whole atrium space that's designed where kids who are waiting for their ride or the bus, now there's a space for them to actually wait and not be bottlenecked in a small little hallway where it's unsafe, and not be thrown out into the rain where they're now getting drenched. So I do think that back entrance is the best space. I don't disagree. We can consider alternative spaces for kids to exit, but I think the staggered dismissal time, along with the staggered start time, is the better approach.
And how long do they get approximately for lunchtime?
The question is, how long do they get for lunchtime? 22 minutes for lunch.
That's waiting online for lunch and sitting down and eating.
Yes.
A lot of assumptions are being made that kids are being picked up and dropped off. And is that the right assumption? I mean, what's our percentage? 50% of the kids are getting picked up from school. So the other 50%, and I'm just throwing a number out there, they're going to live in disparate part of towns, and they're going to want to exit through different doors. So if a child lives on the north end, north of Monroe, we're sending them out the south of the building in the pouring rain to walk around to go up to Monroe. So why wouldn't we just let them leave where they want? I understand
the truth is we do. We don't prevent kids from using any exit.
Yeah, I was going to say, right now, so for security...
Can you use the mic?
Sorry, for security purposes, we do have students come in one way, but when they exit, there are multiple exits that they are allowed to use. Some they are not, depending on portions of the building, but they're allowed to go out this front door, which if you're living on this side of town, gives you access to that side of town. They're allowed to use the side door, which kind of allows for pickup a little bit, and then they can also use that back door. So we are currently doing that right now. They don't all go out the same way. For security purposes, they come in one way, so we can monitor who is entering our building, but they're allowed to leave through various different exits.
Yeah, we don't stop them from going out a door.
There's also about 100 or so kids stay for athletics hours.
Right.
They're not even leaving campus.
Right. And teachers have extra help. One thing I didn't mention, really teachers have extra help after school. So there is a trickle out to a degree. Yes?
The staggering, I know you're working on it, the staggering and dismissal and arrival. How does it affect their timing in classes, also lunch? You know, it's only 22 minutes. Is that going to affect them either?
No. No, we would design the schedule so that it fits in. The building of a schedule is complicated. I don't want to get into it, but we have mostly high school teachers and mostly middle school teachers, but some people cross over, like PE teachers teach band teacher. We only have one, so we have to make sure that the schedules align, but if we can do so intelligently with a staggered, it doesn't affect student time for lunch or things like that. Yes?
I was just going to ask about any academic concerns with the transition for the 5th grade. You had mentioned the switch to quarters, which from trimester to quarter I don't see as being much. Is there anything else that we should be aware of, changing policies that now in the middle school that impact academics?
I don't have any that I've come up with. Our team has kind of processed this. We don't have any kind of academic changes that we see happening. It's a 6th grade moving from one building to another, entering into a middle school schedule and a middle school building with a middle school vibe. But academically, I don't see any. I think this is the good impact is that like a 6th grader being in an elementary school, there's something developmentally that I think is more appropriate for them to feel like I'm in a middle school now and things change and I maybe buckle down a little bit more and hit the books a little bit more. So I'm thinking that's the benefit, but I don't see any downside academically. Yes?
If we have, our child has a younger sibling in Harding, are they allowed to hang out here until they're dismissed over there? Instead of standing outside?
The question is if I have a sibling, if the sixth grader, for example, has a sibling at Harding, can they hang out here? That's a complicated answer. We don't have any official supervision for children after school hours. The library here at Brearley is open Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays for 2 hours after school for students to utilize. But that's the choice of the student to go to the library. So we can't have students just kind of hanging out in hallways. That's a supervision concern. With that said, of like dismissal time does, like the majority of kids leave when the bell rings, but there is kind of a, I'd say 15 to 20 minute lag of students kind of being in the halls, going to their lockers, maybe seeing a teacher for extra help, checking in with a club. So there is that kind of 20 minutes or so. Right now, we have students who do that. And they have siblings, and they're kind of just hanging out until they pick up their sibling at Harding. So I can't say for, firmly, your child is welcome to hang out in the school building and just be here, because we don't have a mechanism for that, but it kind of works. It does kind of work.